Bond. I'm the Executive Director of RARE. And thank you for joining us this evening for RARE's first in-person conversation for Corporation. This is the moment we've all been waiting for, literally for 2 years. So we are so pleased you can join us along with our guest speaker here tonight, Nicola Ross, who's sitting over there, who is here to tell her story of launching her Loops and Lattes hiking guides. And describing her adventure in words and photographs, Nicola will bring alive the rich beauty of the hiking trails available in our backyards that have become her career and vocation. But before I introduce Nicola more fulsomely, I would first like to acknowledge the territory we are on. And obviously we have gathered here tonight in Cambridge, and the Rare Charitable Research Reserve acknowledges and is grateful to all of the original stewards of the land on which Rare resides, within the Haldeman Tract, spanning 6 miles on either side of the Grand River from source to mouth. Understanding that this land has been rich in diverse indigenous presence since time immemorial, we would like to honor and respect the sovereignty of both First Nations in our area, the Haudenosaunee people of the 6 nations of the Grand River, and the Anishinaabe people of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Yahweh miigwech to these nations who share their lands with us. We would also like to acknowledge the neutral peoples and their ancestors and the indigenous paleo hunters who resided on these lands as long ago as 10,500 years. I would also like to acknowledge those indigenous peoples who currently live, work, and learn in the urban landscape around us, such as other self-identified and status First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. And as an organization that is committed to reconciliation with all indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, we recognize that our land acknowledgement is only a very small step in the process of healing and building better relationships with one another and with the land and waters as well. We will continue to honor our commitment to reconciliation by continuing to learn more about truth and settler responsibilities, working towards creation of meaningful and systemic change and relationship building that accommodates indigenous collaborators and RARE to great indigenous knowledges and worldviews. And with this, I am very happy to introduce Nicola Ross tonight. Nicola is actually the winner of numerous writing honors, including a National Magazine Award. And Nicola is also the author of 10 books, including the popular Loops and Lattes hiking guides. She is a very regular contributor to and columnist with In the Hills magazine. And her articles have been published in The Walrus, The Globe and Mail, Explore magazine, Mountain Life, Avenue, the Ontario Nature magazine, Alternatives Journal, and many more. She is obviously also an avid hiker and cyclist who pursues her love of riding, travel, and sport on a full-time basis. Now we all feel really jealous. So for more information about Nicola, you can visit her website at www.loopsandlattes.ca and her blog, Dusty Travels, at www.nicolaross.ca. And after Nicola's talk, we will have time for some questions, so don't hold back once the time comes. And now please join me in welcoming Nicola.
I feel honored to be the inaugural speaker of the in-person session. So thanks for coming out, and I hope you'll enjoy my talk. Can we dim the lights up here a little bit so we can see the slides a little bit better? Is that possible? I think I'll speak for probably about 45 minutes. I'm happy if you ask questions as we go. Is that better? Yeah. Yeah. So I'm happy if you ask questions as we go. We're not, I'd like to have 10,000 people in the audience, but we're a good group. It's great. I think it's like the second biggest audience I've had. At any rate, so I'll talk for about 45 minutes. I realize I haven't given this talk since before COVID, and so there are a couple of, I'll have to remember what I speak about, but launching this business is pretty close to my heart, so hopefully it'll come out. But I've got a bit of an addition to the talk that I couldn't really talk about 2 years ago, and now I can. And it sort of adds to the story as well. So we'll see how that goes. Before I do, how many of you are hikers? How many people are not hikers? You don't have That's great, and I presume you've all walked on the lovely property of Rare. Has everybody been out there? And yeah. As Stephanie mentioned, or maybe she didn't mention, when I was doing the book, I came out here and I contacted Rare to see if somebody would take me out and show me the property. And so is it Tom Woodcock? Got it right. Tom Woodcock, and he says he's an ecologist, I think, as opposed to a biologist. Is that right? And so he took me out, and as I say in the book, the introduction to that hike, I say, there's nothing like having your own ecologist along for your hiking. So I've done that in a few different hikes. The Arboretum in Guelph, I did the same thing. Their biologist took me out. And it's sort of one of the perks of writing a book and being able to do that, being able to call on different people. So there are advantages. And as I tell people, and Stephanie alluded to, I'm a professional hiker. How's that for? and I am working on a new book. It's not a hiking guide, so I've been hiking a lot the last. I did a big trip, a hiking trip in Costa Rica in March. That was 280 kilometers, and then I hiked 250 kilometers in the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And my last hike was 28.8 kilometers, so I've got some, I'm ready. So, but let me tell you about the guides. How many people have the guide or have one of the guides? A few people do, great. So I'll just kind of branch into the story, and as I say, I'm happy to take questions as you go. If I don't see your hand up, just yell at me or something. I come from a family of 5 kids, so I'm used to getting yelled at. So it was back in 2013 when this kind of all began. I was already a writer, and I was at the time the editor of Alternatives Journal, which is an environmental magazine at the University of Waterloo at that time. So that's what I've been doing for the last sort of 6 years. And I was ready to transition into something else, but I didn't really know what it was. So it was 2013, and the way I ended up transitioning, I think I did that in 2012, was my partner, my life partner, owns this beautiful lodge on the French River. Anybody been to the French River? Yes? You ever stayed at the Lodge Pine Cove? Yeah, that's my partner's business. So, and so we were fairly new to one another, but I thought, well, I kind of had to talk him into it. I said, why don't I come up and work at the lodge? I can run the kayaking trips. He has a sort of a soft outfitting business, kayaking trips, canoe trips, lessons, that kind of thing. So I did. It's only open during the summer, and so the summer of 2013, I get the dates mixed up, but back about then, I spent the first summer, and I took out kayaking trips and taught lessons and canoe trips and put together picnics and did all these kind of events, and it was really, really fun. It was all outdoors, and it was all new, and it was challenging. And then the second year, I started working with him, and how many people here have worked with their spouse? It was a little more difficult the second year. I started to know what I was doing, and so we were clashing a little bit, but it was fine. But at any rate, he said to me on my birthday, it might have been the third season, I can't remember. He said to me on my birthday, which is June 3rd, which is coming frighteningly close, he said to me, it was a good way of Alex sort of transitioning me. He said, for your birthday, I'm going to give you something a little bit special. And he said, what I think you should be doing is writing another book. And he said, so for the next 2 years, I'll pay your basic expenses so you can go off and write a book. Pretty nice way to transition out of a job. At any rate, I said, great. Now, the problem was that I didn't have some particular book burning in me to write. I didn't have that novel that I wanted to write. So I wasn't too sure what I wanted to write, and I really enjoyed the outdoor work that I was doing. And so I just kind of took my time. I was working out the season that season, and so I couldn't really start on it till the fall. And I thought more and more about it, and I already did a lot of hiking, and I love to write. And I live in Caledon, which is where I was born, actually, sort of, an hour northeast of here. And I love Caledon, so I thought, I'll write a hiking guide. And I had a friend who was a publisher, and he had sort of put a bit of the idea into my head. He said, why don't you write a book about all the side trails on the Bruce Trail? Well, I didn't really want to do that, but I came up with this idea of doing a hiking guide. And I really knew nothing about writing a hiking guide, but I had led hikes, and we always tried to make them loops. And I don't know about people here, but most Canadians anyway, seem to have a genetic trait that they don't like walking in and then turning around and walking out, right? Even though when you do it, it's great, but we don't like to do it. We like to walk in a circle. I don't know why it is. But at any rate, so I thought I'd do all loop routes. And in Caledon, we have a bunch of different trails, the Bruce Trail and the Oak Ridges Moraine Trail, and we have a couple of rail trails and conservation areas and parks and stuff. So I was able to kind of take different, I knew the area so well, I'd lived there all my life, I was able to come up with these loops. So that was great. And so I came up with the idea, and then I had to figure out how to map the hikes that I was going on. I'd done some other books that I'd done the maps by hand, but that wasn't going to work for this, so I had to get all the, I had to figure out how to use the GPS. Somebody fortunately had left one at the lodge. I don't know whose it was, so I had a GPS. I had to learn how to use that. I had to find software to make it work, and learn how to use some mapping program. All this kind of stuff. And then I had to go out and start hiking the hikes, which is, of course, the fun part is going out and hiking the hikes. So I go out and hike a hike, and then I'd come back in, and then I'd have to write up the hike, and then I'd have to do the maps. So it was a lot of work. Actually, the first book, I didn't even do many of the maps to begin with. I left them. And I think there are 37 hikes in that book, so I kind of left them to do at the end, not realizing what that would mean. But let me use the slides. I was forgetting to use the slides. Yeah, go to the next one. Sorry. These are some of my other books. And here, let's say. So it's a love story, because this is where Alex came to help. The other thing I did, if you go to the next slide, Chris, I decided that I would commission a painting for the cover of the book. I couldn't find a photo I liked, and so I found an artist I liked, and I asked him if he would paint it, and he said, send me some photographs. So on the left is my photograph, and he created this painting out of it. Maybe turn to the next slide. And you can see we kind of changed it. I wanted the trail to be on the cover, that you wanted to go, what's around that corner? I wanted that kind of feel to it. So we had him change it a little bit and then open it up. But that was sort of the first book that came along. I'm not sure. Next slide. Yeah. And so fortunately, the publisher friend I have had a book designer that he'd worked with many times, and so I hooked myself up with her, Jill Steed. Jill has done all my books since then, and we're actually really good friends now. And so she was great. She was able to do all the layouts, quite a complicated layout in these books compared to just writing a novel where it's pretty straightforward. I was also talked into doing it in full color. And this is all, ka-ching, 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 right? So do it in full color, and also the books are all woven bound. You can get books that are glued rather than, and novels are mostly glued and it's a hardcover. And of course for hiking guide, a glued book, it gets wet and it's not a great idea. So all of these were ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. But anyway, so we put together, and then I'd always sort of thought of hiking as not just the hike itself, but where do you go after? Like, what do you do after? How do we turn this into it today? And I used to lead this group. We'd always go out for something afterwards, so I thought, well, I should tell people where to go. And so I started putting this information about, where to go for a drink or a bite to eat. And I coined the phrase après hiking. And then I also knew that a lot of people that haven't done much hiking, they have no idea how long it takes to walk 5 kilometers. Does it take 5 hours? Does it take an hour? When you're starting. And so I thought I really want to give people that don't do a lot of hiking good information so that they're not afraid to go out there. They've got enough information that they can go. And so I put that information in the book. And then I haven't showed it here, but then the other thing I did too is I put in a map that showed where all the trailheads are. So each book has a map where all the trailheads are, so you can kind of geographically decide. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but it was a really good idea, I have to say. I put this chart in each book, and it lists all the hikes from the very shortest to the very longest. So between those two things, do you want to go out for half a day, or do you want to go out for the whole day? Do you want to go for an hour, kind of thing? So those are the kind of things I did, and I guess it's the benefit of having a hiking guide written by somebody that actually has hiked a lot. So those are the ideas, but then I had to do it. So I started hiking all these hikes. Next slide, please. I used to memorize all the slides, so I'm just going to show you a few slides of Caledon and some of the beautiful areas that we have here. And so it was really easy, and I hadn't also intended, I'm not a great photographer, but I had to take pictures, so I just took my camera and took pictures. So next slide. The claving, the badlands. Some people may know these badlands. They're kind of well known there in Caledon. So we had those. I had those to work with. Next slide. And of course, the beautiful fall colors. This house up here is the only house in that. That's in the Force of Credit. If people know the area. That house was built by one of the Eatons. George, I think it just sold. It just sold for $20 million. That house. It was crazy. At any rate, next slide. So this is the Forks of Credit for people that know that area. It's the Credit River, the Mississaugas. You mentioned the Mississaugas of the Credit. This is the Credit River. I live on the Credit River. Next slide. This is the railroad tracks through the big trestle bridge through there. Next slide. Yeah. So to go back to when I started the book, so then I had to, because I was going in full color, I couldn't use this print on demand, which a lot of people use. They just print as many books as they want. So they might print 10 or a dozen or 100, or the case may be. It would have been cost prohibitive to do that. And there's one really good printer for books in Canada. They're outside of Winnipeg. Fortunately, my book designer knew all this information. And so for the Caledon book, I thought, well, I'm going to be really bullish here, because I produced a Caledon book, a hardcover book, but that was in 1997. It was a long time ago. It sold really well. So I thought, I know all the stores in Caledon. I've lived there all my life. I know all the people, so hopefully I can sell a lot of books. So I decided to print 3,000 copies. And I have to realize that for a nonfiction book, a Canadian bestseller, national bestseller, is 5,000. So this was a little bit scary. And by the time I paid my editor and paid the book designer and paid the printing bill, I was out about $25,000. So yeah, so this was a little bit scary. Alex was paying my expenses, so but I still had kind of a big, it was a lot of money for me at the time. Still is. So I send the book off to the printers, and it comes back, and I get the books back on, it was the end of May 2015. And this is the part of the story I haven't told before, so we'll see how it goes. So I get the books, it was about the 26th of May. And on June, maybe the 15th, I was out, as soon as the books come out, it was incredible. They just flew off the shelves, like flew. I was driving around my car was a little bookstore, and I just would go to one, and they were just, I was selling hundreds of the books right off the bat. It was fantastic. And then about June the 15th, I come back to the house and I sit down at my computer and I check my emails, and there's this long list of letters from a lawyer's office. And I thought, oh, this is, just feels very good. And there had been, I won't go into the whole story because it's kind of a complicated story, but there's a landowner that had a right-of-way across land owned by the Ontario Heritage Trust, so it's a quasi-government organization. And and the right-of-way was his driveway, and my hikes went along this driveway. I checked it all out. It was public land. I'd done all my due diligence, because the last thing you want to do when you write a hiking guide is send people onto private property is you pay permission. You don't want to do that. But this individual took exception to that, and so he sent me a letter telling me that if I didn't stop selling my books, he would sue me. There was a little letter in the local community newsletter about the books. If they didn't stop writing, or if they didn't take down this newsletter, he would sue them. The magazine that I write for the most had an excerpt from the books, and if they didn't remove that from the magazine, he would sue them. Then the pièce de résistance. On my website, I had 30 different stores listed that were selling my books, and he sent a letter to all 30 stores and told them if they didn't stop selling my books, he would sue them. Yeah, so this is like 2 weeks after the book has come out. And the reason I haven't talked about this before is that up until 2 years ago, I was in court fighting this thing. It went on and on and on and on. So the next thing I had to do, I didn't know what to do. And this guy was charging me with defamation for $50,000, and he wanted an injunction against my book. And he was also suing the Ontario Heritage Trust because he said the right-of-way was for his exclusive use, not for the use. And if you have public trails, it's the last thing you want is this kind of thing to happen. So a number of the stores that were selling my books called me up and said, come and take your books. And some of them were really rude to me, like I'd done something wrong. But I was totally surprised. Most of them just said, oh, he's a jerk. Don't worry about it, we'll keep selling the books for you. One of my biggest customer is Mountain Equipment Co-op. You might have heard of them, or Mountain Equipment Company as it now is. And they phoned me up and said, we can't sell your book. They bought a case of books, they didn't send them back, they just said until this is cleared up. If it gets cleared up, let us know. So it was kind of a setback. And then I wasn't too sure what to do, but I'd been on a canoe trip a couple of years before, and there was a woman on the canoe trip that was a lawyer, a defamation lawyer. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to call her up, and I'll never forget the day I went to see her. I think I'd lost 10 pounds, and I was a wreck because I didn't know what to do. So I went to see her, and she was just incensed by this whole thing. And she was a lawyer with Tories. Do you know the firm Tories? Like she cost $1,200 an hour, but she was a friend, so she helped me. And she said she'd write a letter to these people and tell them to, go stuff themselves, basically. But that didn't happen, and 2 days later, they did sue me, and they sued the Ontario Heritage Trust, and now I know that, the problem with getting sued is, even if you're innocent, you still have to do something about it. So, a couple days later, I got a letter from this woman, her name is Tricia Jackson, and she sent me this very formal letter, basically saying that Tories wanted to take my case on pro bono. Wow. For free, right? Did I want this? Did I want this, right? And anyway, so they took the case on, and they estimated that it would take, what'd she say, 60 hours. We were in court for 4 years. Yeah, I'll give you the end of that story just so I don't have to go back to it. But in the end, we won hands down the case, both ourselves and the Ontario Heritage Trust. Then appeal the decision. So then we had to go to the appeal court, and we won that hands down. And at the end of it, they owed of course I didn't get any money because I didn't pay any money, but they owed my lawyer and paid just short of $100,000. It was $99,000 and something, and they paid the Ontario Heritage Trust $86,000 in change, and they lost, right? So at any rate, and they didn't sue any of my vendors, but talk about a good way to start selling a book. But nonetheless, while this is all going on, the book keeps selling, not quite as many stores anymore, but the book, and Mountain Equipment Co-op, when I did get the decision, they wanted to see it, they read it, and then they started selling the books again. So they were great. So anyway, I had to keep going anyway, even though I was in court for this injunction against this one book, which is almost impossible to get, but I had to go to court anyway. And I had to keep going, and the Calvin book was selling. It was selling great, right? So I thought, well, why don't I just do another one? And the Calvin one was a one-up. I had no idea it was going to be a series, and so it was a one-up. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do one of the neighboring areas. And I kind of had a choice of Halton, which you guys would know. It's sort of Georgetown, Milton, Burlington, Oakville, Campbellville, or Dufferin. And there was a woman tonight that bought some books, and she said, I want a book for Orangeville. And nobody's ever heard of Orangeville's in Dufferin. Nobody's ever heard of Dufferin County. If you want to go hiking with not that many people, go to Dufferin, because a little bit. So I thought, well, I can do Dufferin because I know that area. It's next door to where I live. I knew it better than Halton. But then I looked at the population difference. Halton has, Burlington, Oakville, Milton, you name it, and Dufferin has Orangeville. So, so being somewhat entrepreneurial, and I thought, okay, I'll do a book for Halton. So, but I didn't know the area very well. I knew some of the hikes. But it wasn't like my backyard. But I just started calling up people at the conservation authorities, or a friend of mine that I knew because I played tennis with her. Her husband was a hike leader in Oakville, and I got him to take me out. And it was kind of fun. It was almost like going to a different country, because I was sort of seeing this landscape, like it was totally new. And what I tell people always, the thing that I like about hiking is like seeing from the inside out rather than the outside in. If you're driving along, you kind of see, you just sort of see the surface, whereas you're in a hike, think about it, you're kind of right in the environment, right in nature, as they say now. And so I got to know this area, and when I was driving here tonight on the same thing, because I haven't been down this road since I did the two hikes in the book that were on this road, and I was recognizing the trees that I saw, and I remembered the heart-shaped fossils on the outside of this building, and so you really kind of get to know the landscape so much more than if you're just... Anyway, so I came up with the idea of doing Halton. Once again, I found a painter. So if you, so here on the left was the photograph. I wanted agriculture, this one, because there is a lot of agriculture. So he kind of took the photo and played with it. And the photo is taken from the Terracotta Conservation Area. Next slide. Oh, I'm missing one. But anyway, I'll show you some pretty pictures about Halton. This is a little bridge. Actually, I walked by this the other day. This is near Limehouse, sort of near Georgetown. And that bridge, I think, has been there for over 200 years. That little tiny little thing. It's only about this wide. Next photo. These are, is anybody a fern specialist? No? These are called walking ferns. There's a trail on the Bruce Trail called the Walking Fern Side Trail. And these ferns, they're called walking ferns because if you're a gardener, they tip root. So this little tip forms a root and forms another fern, and then they walk like that. They're rare. They only grow on the north face of the Niagara Escarpment. So another kind of neat thing, and that's the thing about hiking, as you all know. You get to kind of see neat stuff. Next one. That's just a pretty picture. That's outside of Glen Williams. Glen Williams, if you want to go for a kind of a nice hike, and there's wonderful restaurants in Glen Williams, a tiny little village. Plus there's an old mill that's been turned into art galleries, and there's a couple of antique shops. It's a great, I don't know, have anybody been to Glen Williams? A few people. Yeah, it's a great spot. Go for a hike and then go to Glen Williams. Okay, and then, pardon me?
I'm just trying to hear the rest of the name.
Oh, Glen Williams.
Glen Williams.
Yeah, Glen Williams. Okay. This was in Muskoka, or so it looks, doesn't it? You could be in a Muskoka lake here. That's actually Rockwood. Yeah, I was totally surprised. And it was April, early in the year, and it was the first nice day we'd had, and all these kids were in the water. The water was freezing. There's snow on the shore. At any rate, it was so beautiful, Rockwood. Next slide. This is the Nasagawaya Canyon that separates Crawford Lake Conservation Area near Campbellville and Rattlesnake Point. Some of you may have heard of Rattlesnake Point. Spectacular. I just walked this hike the other day again. And it's just these tall eastern hemlocks all through there. And again, another spectacular hike. And Stephanie again was talking about the land claims in this area, the land, what's the term I want?
Territory.
Territory, thank you. The Crawford Lake has some wonderful, they've rebuilt some longhouses there. There was a lot of indigenous activity in the area. And there's something called a Meromititic Lake. I got that wrong, but it's like that. You've seen it? And what that is, the lake that's so deep that the sediments in the bottom don't ever turn over. And it's very rare, but because that was the case, all the sediments still contained all the plant life, all the animal life, there was evidence of indigenous population. It was all down there. It had never been touched because the lake doesn't turn over. So they discovered a lot about the indigenous occupation in this area. So it's very, very interesting. Next slide. Those are the cliffs. I think that's Kelso. And one of the things I found when I was hiking in this area were there were a lot of great vistas, these great high vistas. So you had to climb up to them, but they were great. Next one. Yeah, and great views, as I say. Next slide. And I love boardwalks, so this was my favorite boardwalk I think I've ever come across, but at any rate, it's great. It's on the Guelph Radial Run Trail. Next one. Okay, so now Dufferin, I came out with the book, and that was great, the same kind of thing. This time I was going to be even more bullish, because I'd actually reprinted Caledon by then. So I thought, I'm going to print 5,000 copies of Halton. Bigger population than Caledon. You know, the Caledon book sold well. So, you know, I went and did all this stuff again. Now this time I think I'm $30,000 in debt when the book comes out. And then I realized, and it came out in November, and I realized I don't know any of the stores in Halton. It's not like Caledon, you know, that people that I know own the stores. And so I'll never forget one day, it was one of those awful November days where it's bitter, it's kind of snowing, but it's not really. And so Alex took me, and we drove down to Oakville. So I was just going to drop into stores in Oakville to see if they'd sell my books for me. And so I go into anybody here from Oakville? Sorry about this. You know, it's pretty snazzy, you know, and I'm like kind of in hiking gear, and you know, anybody I see, they're all dressed up. Yes, that's right. So I go in, and then on top of that, it's November, and so the stores are packed with Christmas stuff. Like they are, I'm months behind you know, I'm too late to get my books into these stores, but like I gotta sell books, so. And I'm going in, and I'm taking my little box of books. I look at, you know, the Britannica salesperson. I'm going in. will you sell my books for me, right? And most of them said no. And I sell the books at cafes because of the loops and lattes. Oh, the name, I didn't tell you that. The name, the loops, and I told you the loops, but the lattes part is, one, it's alliteration, but two, I like lattes, and three, this isn't the backcountry, this isn't the Rocky Mountains, the hiking here, but often you can get a latte right like during the hike, and that's pretty cool. So loops and lattes. And when I came out with the Halton book, it wasn't a brand. It was just the name of the Kaladin book. But then somebody wanted, the book designer, she said, well, that's the brand name. So anyway, so I went into this cafe. It's called Tribeca. It's right on Lakeshore Boulevard, or Lakeshore Road. And I go in, and it's like shishi, really shishi. And I'm in hiking gear. And I got my little back button, but somebody told me this guy, Dave, that owned it, was a really nice guy. So I asked to speak to Dave, and Dave came out, and I said, I want to sell my books, would you sell my books? And he was busy, right? And finally he said, yeah, okay. And I said, yeah, okay. Like, I was so excited. And so I said, well, where should I put them? And I had 2 boxes, one with the Halton book and one with the Kaladin book. And he points to the back corner of the cafe, and there's a shelf. It's a round shelf. It kind of turns around, it's about this high, and it's got coffee paraphernalia on it, right? And he says, oh, put it there. And then he points to the bottom shelf facing toward the wall. He said, they'll fit in there, right? And so, but I'm so excited. And so I have my books, and they've got these, this one's a little crumpled, but they have this little thing here, and I go up in the shop, and I have to kind of bend the thing over, and I'm down on my knees putting these books down there, and I'm thinking this is really bad merchandising, but man, this guy took the books. So after that, I went back to the car, and I said, because every time I'd come, somebody would say no to me. I'd come back to the car, and Alex would give me this little pep talk. It was like he was, booting me up the car to go to the next one. And when I came back this time, I said, I think we should go for lunch and celebrate. This guy actually took 16 books on consignment. At any rate, so we went home, and it was a week later, not more than a week later, Dave phones me up, and he goes, those books, like, they're all gone. He goes, all of them, can you bring some more? So I said, sure. So I went down, and I go in with a bigger box of books this time. And this time, when I was met at the door, the baristas in their little skirts and stuff, they came and met me and took the books from me, and then immediately put them right on the counter by the cash register. And then they took pictures for their Instagram account with me and my books. Like I was a star all of a sudden. And that, I don't know how many hundreds of books that coffee shop. So Dave and I always laugh about it, that he was my great test case. It was sort of, it was just that moment where I thought, oh, well, I guess it's, the book isn't just selling because it's Kaladin and they know me. People really want hiking guides. And so I printed 5,000 copies, and my goal was that by Christmas time, or by the end of the year, I wanted to have sold 1,000 copies, if I could, because that more or less pays me back, and that would make me feel good. But it was crazy. It was just insane. Once they took off these books, they just took off. And so finally I added up all my sales at the end of the year, in the new year, and I sold actually 2,000 copies. I sold 2,000 copies of the books in a month. So I knew I was onto a good thing, and then I thought, oh well, okay, let's, now I do have something. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this and it's going to be a brand, then I'm going to have to, 2 books do not make a brand. So I'm going to have to produce a bunch more of these books, and I've got to do it fast because I want to own this real estate. I don't want somebody else coming along and stealing it. So Kaladin came out in 2015, Halton came out in 2016, then Dufferin, and it was neat because every area is different. Halton was, a lot of kind of busy roads, harder to get away from noise and traffic than Kaladin. Caledon too, you know, more and more people in the area. And then I got to Dufferin, and it was just like, it was so lovely, because it was so much more rural than, hills were bigger, but it was more rural. Next slide, please. And what I started to do actually with the Holton book is I started taking advertising in the books too, which helped. So again, I had a painter. It got changed a bit. Actually, the book designer at one point in time, she leveled the trail out, and then the artist saw that, and I got talked to by the artist, and so we had to tilt the landscape again. So next slide. Yeah, and this is Mona Cliffs Park, if any of you have been up there. That's an outlier on the Bruce Trail. All my books until I got to this one here were really on the Bruce Trail, used the Bruce Trail a lot. Next one. Yeah, so that's up even further north. Beautiful countryside up there again. Yeah, I love those sort of tunnels going through. This is in the Hockley Valley. If any of you know the Hockley Valley, that's in Dufferin. Next one. This is a very famous, I keep coming across cars. Anybody that's done this hike knows this card. The funny story here is it's right on the trail, and after the book came out, I got an email from this person from Saskatchewan, and he had been at the bookstore in Orangeville. He'd come visiting family, and he grew up on the farm, and this was his father's or his uncle's car, and he told me the whole story of it, which was kind of fun. Anyway, next photo. Another pretty picture, my good friend and fellow hiker. And next. Yeah, that's the Grand Valley Trail, I think. Anyway, next trail, or next photo, yeah. So now I had 3 hiking guides, and I'd reprinted the Caledon one, so that, you know, it was going pretty well. And while I was working on the Dufferin book, I got a call from something called the Hamilton Holton Grant Tourism Association, Regional Tourism Association, and they said, we want one. We want one for Hamilton. And they gave me $10,000. Awesome. So I hired, you'll see there's 2 names on this one, Amy Darrell. So I hired Amy Darrell to help me out because this was the 4th book in 4 years, and I didn't have enough time. So she did a lot of this book. I just hiked a lot of the hikes that I hadn't done before in Hamilton. How many people have hiked in the Hamilton area? Yeah, waterfalls, right? And when I heard that there were waterfalls in around Hamilton, I thought little trickles, right? No, like they're huge waterfalls. And it was actually just the other day, because Hamilton claims to be the waterfall capital of the world, which I thought was a little cheeky, right? But then I looked it up, and there are more waterfalls within Hamilton, probably the regional municipality, than in any other city in the world. So it is. It really is. Yeah. This is Sherman Falls. Again, I got an artist to paint this for me. And so again, great hiking. Still a little bit urban compared to the north, but some beautiful hikes, and also got into the Royal Botanical Gardens, which was fun to do some of those hikes. It was a great one to do as well. And you get to go to Paris, that's the other. You get to go to Paris. Next slide. Again, I'm just showing you the photos here, or the comparison. Next one. I think that's, I did it earlier today, and I figured at Tiffany Falls, I think, but I'm not too sure. Again, that's Albion from the side. And the next one, I think that's a Devil's Punch Bowl with water in it, because often there's not much. It's either Devil's Punch Bowl or Balls Falls. I'm not sure which. And that's Amy, actually, at the top. In Hamilton, they have, I think, 7 different staircases that go up, and they're quite a thing. They go a long way up, and Hamiltonians use them for exercise. So they're just always people on them. and you need to find a climbed one. So, next slide. And so that's some of the views, because the escarpment goes right through, the Bruce Trail goes right through him. Next slide. Vultures. Next slide. Okay. So that brings us here. And so I looked at the map, deciding where to come up with a guide next, and I was really afraid to do this area because the Bruce Trail isn't here. And I thought, there are not going to be enough trails. There can't be enough trails in this area, right? And again, I didn't really know anyone or anything, and so I started calling around. And man, you guys got trails in this area. It was unbelievable. What was wonderful as well were the great towns that I got to the Ferguson, Elora, and Elmira. These wonderful, wonderful towns. And those ones I knew, but I'd never been to Blair before. And so there was a lot of even more new territory for me. And then the first time I saw a Mennonite wagon being pulled by horses, I thought, oh my God, I better get a picture because, this might be my only chance. Little did I know that, I made 20 a day and so I really found the whole cultural, that whole Mennonite part was interesting. I sell the books at a few shops, Mennonite stores, and they're I love the women that I sell to. I hope it comes across the right way, because they're in their bonnets and dresses, and it doesn't occur to me that they're going to be interested in hiking when you've got a bonnet and a dress on, but all these women are fantastic. They're such good business women, and they pay right away, and there's no credit cards, it's just checks or cash, and they're very straightforward. So I've had real fun getting to know some of the Mennonite women. Next slide. This was the first one I did commission the painting. I just bought the painting. She's a woman in Guelph. I just really liked the painting, so hence there came the cover. And I did manage to get the covered bridge. How many people have been to this covered bridge? A few people, yeah. So I did get to see the horse and buggy and the covered bridge at the same time. I was quite proud of myself. Yeah. Now, the reason I put this picture in here is that the one thing about this area relative to some of the other areas, and I've been castigated for saying this, but it's pretty flat in compared to Dufferin or getting up into, or even Caledon where I'm coming from. And so it's kind of nice because I didn't have to climb a lot of hills and I had to laugh. This is a trail that runs up the side of the highway between Waterloo and St. Jacobs, and it's just this flat trail, right? And there was this hill, like honest to gosh, it was the tiny little hill, right? There's a warning sign. It's like a steep hill ahead. And many of you remember Vinyl Cafe, Stuart McLean's CBC program, and he has a tagline, and his tagline is, "We're not big, but we're small." So in this book I wrote, "We're not hilly, but we're flat." So I had a lot of fun, again, coming into this area. I'd never heard of Rare before. I'd heard about, what's the name of the fancy hotel across the Yeah, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know where it was. So all these things were great. The other thing I did is I have a couple hikes in the book where you took the train for part of it, so I got to go for train rides, which was kind of fun. So lots of different stuff on the hikes here, and the hiking was really, really lovely. That's Elora Gorge, I think. Next slide. And that's the Conestoga River, and of course the Grand River was a big part of a lot of the hikes through here in the Helmsman book. Yeah, next slide. Next slide. This was one day I was hiking the other side of Waterloo, and I had my dog with me, and I was looking at my map trying to figure something out. I just got out of the car. I was basically in a suburb, and my dog was kind of rummaging around. And then I looked down, and she's rummaging because there's this tiny little fawn, like right here, I was practically touching it with my feet. And this was a hike, again, I thought was going to be too urban, right? Because it was right on the edge of Waterloo, and there's this little fawn. Yeah, so, you know, some of the fun things about hiking. Yeah, next slide. This is a day, this is hiking Guelph. It was early in the spring, and the trail had flooded, and honest to God, the water was up to here. It was April, it was pretty cold, and my dog was not too pleased, so she was trying to float. Those are the boardwalks that float into the surface. So she was trying to stay dry. So it's my glamorous profession. Oh, that's just a trail. That's part of the trail right well early in the spring. Next one. Oh, and I took this. We happened to do a long hike on, I can't remember the name of the holiday. It's a big holiday for the Mennonites. And there were Mennonites everywhere doing, you know, it just never occurred to me. And this guy was so much fun. He just laughed. He was so happy. And there were about 10 of them, all in their bright colored kayaks. It was great. So next slide. Oh, there's funny bird feeders here. Next slide. Yeah, this is the Wellington Museum. And have people been in there? It was built as a, you know, house for wayward people. It's a very interesting story. And a very interesting cemetery there as well, if you can fit back. Next photo. And this is just some of the Mennonite store. I love the hats and the fabrics. Okay. Oh yes, I have a few pictures from here. This is the day that I went out with Tom, so these cliffs might look familiar. Next photo. And I think that area is an area where they think there was an indigenous population living in that area. The ours were out when I was there, and I learned from Tom that the purple ones are the native ones and the yellow ones are the introduced. Next slide. And who knows what that is? Okay, don't say. This I've never heard of one of these. There's a lot of alvar in this area, which is surface limestone, but there's two of them here, and that is a grike. Grike, rhymes with strike. And it's, I looked up what it was. I just was so focused on remembering what it was called. I can't remember what it is. I think it's where the water has formed a little channel in the limestone. But anyway, it's a grike. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. At the time, you had 3 osprey nests. I don't know if you have more than that now. And Tom said they were osprey in all 3 of them. So, cool. Next one. That's right up here, isn't it? Yeah, eagle. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and there's that. Has everybody seen the heart fossils here? Yeah, are there any inside or just outside? Inside. Yeah, so these little heart fossils, and there are a lot of them on the building just outside here, which is really cool. Next slide. The Grand River. And it is very grand. Compared to the Credit and some of the other rivers in southern Ontario, it's a big river. Next slide. Okay, and quickly I'll just go through. Collingwood Guide, I started researching it in May of 2020. So it was March when we got the big lockdown, and it was May when they finally started opening the parks again. And like everybody else here, I was just like, let me out. So the moment I could, I thought, there's nothing else I can do this year, so I might as well write another hiking guide because there's nothing. And so I produced this last book in 6 months from the time I did the first hike until it came out. And I'll just go quickly. Collingwood, I was speaking to somebody before, Collingwood, Blue Mountain, and Beaver Valley, lots of hiking. You can go for kilometers between, hiking before you get to another road. Big hills, it's much more rural than it just keeps getting more rural as you go north. So fantastic hiking, great places to eat and drink, and again, a huge success for the, okay, so next slide. So there's the painting, and just have some nice pictures, I think. Yeah, so these great, huge, expansive valleys. Next one. Yeah. Does anybody know what that is? Old Baldy. Yeah, that's just above Kimberley. So you can climb up to Old Baldy and sit up there. It's a great place to. I went up really early in the morning with a nice hot coffee that I brought a thermos and sat up there all by myself. It's great. That is the Keyhole. I think in St. Hampton. Next one. And that's Georgian Bay, looking from the top of Georgian Peaks. And then the Wasaga, we've all heard of Wasaga Beach. There's good hiking in Wasaga Park, the provincial park, and it's sand dunes. These huge sand dunes all over the place. Next slide. That's my favorite photo I've taken. Yeah. Next one. Yeah. Oh, these are just, we just go through. I get, I do a lot of walking on roads, and so they have these great things on the sides of roads. Yeah. That's before and after, spring and fall. For the birds. And these guys have chickens. Yeah, free head exam. I love that. I love that. Okay. Hockey night in Caledon. This is on a park bench in one of the parks. Free parking, Anthony Wheaton. It's just an old piece of equipment. Hi. I saw one the other day I came across, and there was a power pole and had a sign on it, a proper sign, and it said dog water, and it pointed down. There was nothing there, but then somebody had taken a piece of tape and gone across it and written on it, closed for the season. Which I really like. I think that's just a couple more. Oh yeah, Prayer of the Woods. And this is my motto. This was written on graffiti on a trail that goes under the Red Valley Parkway in Hamilton. So stay lost. I thought that was a great message. And I just hiked that since I did this book that hike in 2016. And I walked there about 3 weeks ago, and it's gone. And that's Caledon. So anyway, so that's my talk. And now I've sold 45,000 copies of the book. I reprinted the Caledon book 3 times. The Halton book I reprinted 3 times. In fact, I totally revised it. It's even got a new cover. The Dufferin book sells more slowly. That's why I tell everybody, go hike in Dufferin, because Hamilton I've reprinted 3 times, and I've reprinted Collingwood twice. So it's been a huge success. And I think whoever, I guess it was Chris, there was an article in the Record, the Kitchener-Waterloo Record, whatever it is now. And he's a great writer, Joel Rubinoff. Yes, and he had this funny, maybe you saw it, the headline was, Local Hiking Guide Outsells Harry Potter, yeah, right? And so he did that, and then they put an editorial, and I think I sold $20,000 worth of books because of that one article. And I think I'm here tonight because I'm giving a bunch of talks. That's the same thing. It was unbelievable. I've only got 2.5 cases of this book left, and I can't get the printers until October, so I'm going to run out of them. So lots of good hikers in this area. Anyway, so thank you very much. I hope I entertained you a little bit.
That was very engaging. Are there any questions for Nicola?
And when are you doing the first count?
Yeah, I get asked those questions. I haven't got it. Yeah, I'm going to be doing more hiking up there, and I am really keen to do it, but I don't know when I'm going to do it. Niagara Peninsula, I get asked for the most.
And the West Coast.
Yeah, all down there.
Greater Point.
Yeah, I don't know the area very well, so it's big high on my list because I don't know it. So, but thank you for the
I see the
idea.
Mennonites there too.
Oh, really?
Moving over this area and
Moving up there. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
What was your favorite hike in this area?
What was my favorite hike?
And Waterloo, Wellington?
Oh, yeah, it's hard. It was beautiful, the one here. I really like the one. There's a loop that goes from Allure to Ferguson back, which is kind of nice because you get both towns, and part of it's on a rail trail and part of it's all through the Allure Gorge and everything. So there's so much on it. I haven't done the Paris. There's a Paris hike that I really want to do. I haven't done it yet. Well, that's not really this area. Around here, closer in. Oh, let me think about it, and I'll think of some. I have to sort of put my memory caps on. Yeah. We'll look through the book, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to think about it. Yes.
When you're doing an area, do you walk all of the trails, or do you have folks that walk them for you?
No, I walk them all. Now, the exception is the Hampton one, because I hired Amy to do that. No, I hike all the things, but what I do is I have a crew of beta testers, sort of like testing recipes, right? So I have them go out, and once I've written up I give them my instructions and the maps, and they go out and do it. And that saved, not just me, but you guys. Because every now and then, I'll say right when I made left, or it's just not clear. And it was funny when I redid this book, I injured my knee. And so rather than me re-walking on the trails, I got my best beta testers to go out and re-hike these hikes. And I thought I would have trouble, but of course it was in the middle again. It was 2021, and still nothing was open. The golf courses had shut down again, and so I had this long list of beta testers that wanted to get out and do these hikes. Like sometimes I had like 2 or 3 people doing the same one because I didn't want to say no. So that's what I do. But otherwise, I hike them all myself. Yeah.
As a hiking guide, what are the best formula for constructing your books? Like, I know you have maps and stuff. I haven't seen one of your books, but I've used sometimes a trail guide, and I found them very confusing.
Yeah.
When you're just following it digitally. So,
I have found that hiking is a sport where a physical guide is better than an online. Cycling, I do a fair bit of cycling. It works, it works for other things, but I find and plus I have time to kind of stop and read it. And my guides give kind of, bits and pieces of information. You're walking along and it'll tell you what that is, or say, I saw a great bird here. Did you know that this kind of bird does this? So, and I give really clear directions. And I make sure that I tell you where the trailhead is. How many people have got to where you think there's a trailhead and you can't find the damn trail, right? Or you go the wrong way on the trail. So I make sure that, there's clear directions on that. So it's really a clarity. I think because I'm a hiker, it's a little bit easier. And like some of the directions are to the point where they're probably a little overwhelming because they're so clear. And I do get people that do a lot of hiking, and they say, I know all the hikes in the area. I don't know how many times. I know all the hikes. And then I get a lot of people coming back. They get the book, or somebody gives it to them, and they go, I didn't know about all those hikes. So just knowing where the hikes are is a big part of it. Because you go to a place you don't know, and you just don't know where the hikes are. You don't know where. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I have a terrible sense of direction, and I like to walk, but I have trouble getting to the start tunnel because I don't know how to get off the highway.
Yeah.
And your books are great.
I give the GPS coordinates. So
yes, and they also say turn on this road, and then as opposed to just assuming you're not going to get off the road.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that, and the well-drawn maps, because you can look and say, there's that. Like, what is this? This is exactly.
I'm very proud of the mountains. Yeah, we put it up. Thank you. Yes.
Have you walked or cycled the G2G trail?
I've done part of it. I've done, I did from 12 to, the name of the town, so 3, it's like the Kissing Bridge section I did.
A little further, you say that to go through more.
Yes, and there's a book a woman wrote, she's from around here somewhere, and she wrote a book called Walking Home. And she did the whole thing with her husband, and they weren't really hikers. It's quite a funny story, so it's worth picking up. The book has an ad for it, I think, if you want to get the name of it. So yeah, someday I'll get on that trail. I know. Yeah. Somebody hikes, yeah.
I have a question
Yes.
too. So I bought the book at Wordsworth Books after the record article came out, and I was just looking at it recently, and I realized there's a lot of rail trails in there. Are a lot of those trails multi-use trails that you can also bike?
Yes. I didn't, people ask me, can you bike on these trails? And I don't say in the book whether you can or not, because often, because they're loose, you might do a portion on the rail trail that is open to bikes, but then it goes on to maybe Bruce Trail or City Trail or something for bikes. So I just didn't deal with that. But the rail trails usually are open to bikes. So and there is conflict between bikes and hikers. That's for sure. And the trail, And as we know, the trails are a lot busier now since COVID. So yeah. So it is a bit of an issue, but we try to be patient. Not gonna have anything else. I do have books for sale if you want to buy them. They're normally $30, but they're $25 tonight. And I take credit cards and cash. I have some earrings too. And super cool. So yes.
A bunch of us here are from a marketing group in the area that we do it, and some of us, we're sort of shut down because we usually have very large groups and that being smaller. A couple of us got the book, and then it was like, this is what we're going to do. And this time it got us through, and now we're like, what the heck? I don't know about compliments. But it's just the flow for us. It's like, everybody else said, you know what this is. Our group knows very well these books.
Well, I get a number, and it tends to be women's hiking groups, and they just kind of go through them all, and they try to get through them all. But it's very it's so complimented. It's they're like my little babies, but everybody's a dog. It's really nice. So thank you. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? No, well, thank you, Nicola.
Thank
This
you
was
for
really
having
great.
me.
And thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. It was a really great presentation. And as you have heard, the water region books are close to selling out, so this is your opportunity here to grab one. I can highly recommend it. There was a few things in there I didn't even know about, and I felt I know a lot of trails in the area, so I'm kind of curious actually about the other books as well. So if you all enjoyed this event, which I hope you did, and would like to see more events like this, please sign up for our newsletter or visit our website on www.raresites.org and consider making a donation as well. And all donations over $20 will receive an automatically generated text receipt that will be straight sent to your inbox. And we actually have a particularly new fancy device now that makes it really easy to do that, which is over there in the corner, our little tip-tap sign. So you can directly, after you buy your book, tap your card to make a little donation as well. So this is brand new. It's only the second time we've been using it, so we're kind of curious to see how it's being received. And there are 3 different levels of giving that you can do at the tip-tap sign, which is $2, $10, and $20, and that will then automatically go to Rhea. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you also to James and Chris for organizing and setting everything up and running this here tonight. And we hope we see you all again in person, hopefully at our next event. So stay tuned for more information, and have a good night, everyone.